Howdy, my name is Carson Cray.
Howdy, my name is Chaney Elliott, and today's episode is called In the Fine Print.
Okay, so everyone knows the main rules of archery, but not many people actually spend their time looking through the rule book, and I mean, I can't blame them. But I decided for this episode to take a little look-see, and we're going to talk about some rules that I found that I thought were interesting and our opinions on them.
Now just remember to read between the lines. Just because it's fine print doesn't mean it's not important.
Archery Academia.
Okay, for starters, I know we're all guilty of it. It's okay to admit it. We don't read the terms and conditions when we sign a contract. It's okay to admit that. Not everyone's a lawyer. It's okay. But today's episode is all about that mumbo jumbo legal stuff.
So I know a lot of you probably didn't even read the terms and conditions that you signed to get on whatever app you're listening to this on.
I know for sure I didn't.
What do? We all scroll to the bottom as quick as we can and then click that little check mark box.
I am very, very guilty of that. Hasn't caused any damage so far, but probably one day it'll bite me in the butt. But who knows?
So I decided, like I said in the intro, that I was going to take a look through the rule book because I know there's a lot of things that you either don't really catch when you're just performing archery, and there's some weird things that nobody really talks about. So we just wanted to inform you guys and just make an interesting episode about it.
Yeah, it almost feels like these rule books, it's like the laws in your country or wherever you live. You're not going to go out of your way just to read that. Like, it's just kind of implied. Don't do anything stupid and you won't get caught, or don't do anything bad and you won't get punished. But there are people that need, like, these rules are in place for a reason, and we're going to discuss the weirder ones that Carson has found for us, and we're just going to kind of like bounce off each other and see what kind of mayhem we can come up with. But there is a very key component to this, and Carson can explain it a lot better than me. So, can you explain like the appeal process type thing?
So one of the reasons we wanted to bring this episode to you was to just inform you so that you guys can keep yourself safe and advocate for yourself if something were to arise and you don't know what's going on. So in USA Archery and World Archery, there is an appeal process. At any tournament that is USA Archery sanctioned, you can put up $50 and appeal a decision. Now, you cannot appeal a judge call if you don't like it. If you think it was a 7, but it was actually a 6, you can't appeal it. The judge call is final. However, if, for example, we're going to talk about dress code in a little bit, if somebody says, well, your shorts are too short, but they're below your knees, you could technically appeal it, and you put up $50. They get a jury of appeals together, which is just people who know the rule book very well. They get a jury of appeals together. They debate whether they think the rule applies in your situation, and if you win, you get your $50 back and the ruling is overturned. And if you don't win, the ruling sticks and you don't get your $50 back.
And this appeal process can also apply, like Carson said, oh, your shorts are too short, I'm going to press a charge against you or call you out on it. And you can appeal that, but someone could also say like, oh, those arrows shouldn't be allowed for blah, blah, blah reason. And at that point, you're fighting to keep those scoring arrows or whatever arrows they are in play. And so if you win that appeal case, those arrows get to stay, like you're good. But if you lose, on top of losing $50, you're losing those scoring arrows or that equipment, or even the worst case, getting kicked out of the tournament as a whole. So this appeal process is to defend yourself, like prosecution, and defend it. Again, legal mumbo jumbo, but it's to help people not take advantage of the system, because the system is there for a reason. And today we want to kind of just give you a heads up, because this is important to know, even though we don't really think about it on a day-to-day basis.
And this can even be brought against your opponent. Please don't use it in a way to call out people unnecessarily. But let's say someone is doing something that is clearly against the rules. You can appeal it if a judge isn't doing anything or if a judge just lets it go. If they are doing something against the rules and it should be stopped for safety or other concerns, there's a reason these rules are in place.
Definitely. And we're here to talk about the wacky ones for sure. But I'd highly suggest everyone go read these rules, especially if you shoot at the higher level competitively like me and Carson do. It's always good to know these rules, at least by the handful. I'm not telling you to go memorize the whole book, but it's good to know like what exactly needs to be stopped when and what is allowed and isn't allowed. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about today.
All right. So I kind of mentioned it earlier, but the entire reason that I wanted to do an episode like this was to talk about the dress code, because I personally think some rulings in the dress code are not the brightest, because we'll see it in a little bit, but a lot of them are either up for interpretation, they're unclear, or they simply don't add or subtract anything from the sport. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. A lot of these things that I mentioned where it's up for interpretation or it's different is because there's a lot of discrepancies between the USA Archery dress code and the World Archery dress code, even though they're technically under the same governing body, which is World Archery.
Yeah, it's very strange, but what can you really do? If you can follow one, you might not be following the other. So it's always good to watch out for that.
So I took the time to go ahead and separate. We have a little document we have every time. So I took the time to separate what was USA Archery and what was World Archery for the things that seem to be different. So the one thing I did want to mention, though, before we jumped into the actual rules, was World Archery, in the introduction of their dress regulations rulebook, which is chapter 20 of the World Archery rulebook, they have the most interesting introduction. So, Chaney, if you would like to go ahead and read that, you can go ahead.
I gotta get ready for this. World Championships are majestic occasions, honored by the attendance of many dignitaries.
So, I think what they're saying is pretty much it's a professional occasion. You should dress professionally and conduct yourself professionally. However, they seem to pull random words out of nowhere to make this sound more like frou-frou than it already is.
Like, I know archery is a high tier sport, but like majestic occasions, attendance of many dignitaries, like what?
And just to make it clear that it's not like a translation error or anything like that, the World Archery rule book and World Archery events are conducted in English because most countries have to learn English anyways because of the high, the high volume of English commerce and stuff like that with the US and Great Britain. So most countries have to speak English, so that's what World Archery is primarily conducted in. So it's not a translation. It's just they decided to use those words.
Which is hilarious. And even like the second half of it, all athletes, team managers, and officials participating in the opening and closing ceremonies should be dressed in uniform of their respective members' association. Seems pretty normal. It's just that one sentence right at the start that is like, what?
USA Archery has a very similar blurb. It's pretty much they have to follow the dress code policy whenever they are on the field of play. But World Archery just went above and beyond just to like nail in that it's a majestic occasion.
This is the place you'll want to be. That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's crazy wording, and there's going to be so many crazy wording in this whole thing because nothing can be just cut and dry. Nothing can be black and white. And you know what? That's okay.
So we're going to go ahead and start right off the bat with my least favorite rule in pretty much anything, because you see this a lot in like school dress codes and stuff like that, which is short length / like bottom length. Now, World Archery does it in a way that is, although may not be the best, it's measurable. It's something that you can see and rule on. So what World Archery says on the topic is leg wear may not be shorter than the athlete's fingertips when the arms and fingers are extended at the athlete's sides. Now, as someone with very long arms, that's not the best ruling for me.
You have very, very long arms.
I do have very long arms, and I've struggled with like rules like this my entire childhood with school dress codes. But it's at least it's measurable. It's something that you can look and say, hey, they're shorter than your fingertips. Those aren't allowed.
Yeah. And that's perfectly fine. Like, if that's in the rules, the rule has to be followed. And there's not much you can really say against it. But what makes me laugh is the USA Archery wording on this topic. And that is simply, in one sentence, mind you, shorts, skirts, and skirts must be professional in appearance and length. Huh?
Now, what does that mean?
What do you mean by that?
Respectfully, everyone is going to have a different interpretation of what professional in appearance and length means. So this is one of those rules where if somebody calls you out on it, as long as it's not blaringly obvious, I mean, wear appropriate clothing to sporting events. But as long as it's not glaringly obvious, there's a good chance you'll win an appeal if somebody tries to call you out on it in a USA Archery event.
Yeah, totally.
Because professional in appearance and length, that's different. Like, what profession are they talking about? Because in my opinion, when I think professional, I think slacks. Like but those aren't required. For some people might think jeans because they have to wear jeans for their work. Some people might think a short skirt because that's what they have to wear. It's different for everyone, and I don't think that's something that can be ruled on similarly across the board.
Yeah, like Carson said, it's all up to interpretation, and it's not just cut and dry like the World Archery side, because on World Archery side, it says fingertip length or longer. USA Archery, it just got to be professional. And something, I've dealt with this my entire life, something that looks professional on someone else might not look professional on me, or what's professional on me might not look professional on someone else. And so it's just all kind of circling back to interpretation, and that's why we do have those appeals, and they're really handy for that. I don't think I've met someone that's been called out for dressing inappropriately. I know I've had a case where a judge came up and asked me to change my shorts, but I was also a kid and didn't realize I had to be in appropriate attire during unofficial practice.
I do want to mention too, since I've been in archery, which has been a long time, but not a super long time. It's about 6 years at this point. The USA Archery ruling has changed so many times. So it started when I entered, it was mid-thigh. So it was the halfway point between your hip bone and your knee. And I thought that was a pretty good ruling. Like, that's measurable. And then it changed to the fingertips. Again, measurable, not my favorite, but measurable. And then it changed to professional in appearance and length. And my opinion is, why did you change it in the first place?
Yeah.
It was a perfectly good rule before.
Especially even the mid-thigh like ruling, that's still pretty professional because they're longer than most things that I see now, because professional in appearance is all up to interpretation. And it's just something that people take advantage of. And I'm not saying to go call out every person that you see that you don't like what they're wearing. I'm not telling you to do that. Let them wear what they want to wear. But if it's blaringly obvious, like Carson said, that it's inappropriate, do call them out because you don't want them to set a bad example for someone else.
Another thing, and then we'll move on to the next topic, is it's not something that can be uniformly enforced. So, for example, the USAT series, the USA Archery events, at one tournament, you could wear the same shorts, and then at another tournament, they can be not allowed. It's not because you've changed at all. It's not because the shorts have changed. It's just because a different judge is looking at them. A different judge sees them as professional or not.
And that's something that happens everywhere. And it happens outside of archery too, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we don't need to be talking to. But the next thing is denim, jeans, blue jeans. Texas girl, born and raised. I know a lot about blue jeans, but I never really thought about the rules behind it because I just always wore them. And there's a good bit of rules, honestly. Carson, if you want to speak on them.
So for World Archery, there's like a whole sentence, a singular sentence about what can't be worn. So I'm just going to read it all and then we're going to kind of break it down. So no denim or jeans, regardless of the color, or camouflage clothes and equipment may be worn, nor any oversized baggy type pants or shorts. We're going to stop right at no denim or jeans of any color. So in World Archery, you aren't allowed to wear jeans at all. You just can't. And I don't exactly know the reasoning behind this rule, but it's just a rule and you have to follow it.
I think if I had to see why they're not allowed is in some countries, in some places, even some places in America, when you're wearing jeans, you don't look professional. Like I said, I was born and raised in Texas. Dad wears blue jeans to weddings. He wears them to work sometimes when he has meetings. He dresses them up. But you can also dress them down. I can understand why they don't want denim or jeans of any color because some places don't think they're professional. They think slacks or solid color, black, khaki, or blue. Like, that's it. And so I understand that rule. Not saying I don't agree with it, but I guess I don't really have an opinion on it other than I understand.
Yeah, and besides, for World Archery events, normally your home country gives you some kind of pants or tells you what pants to buy. So it's not like you're showing up and all of a sudden you can't wear your denim. It's usually you're provided or you know exactly what you're supposed to buy. So it's not as strict of a rule as you think it is because you have to match people anyways. But on the USA Archery side, denim is allowed. It can't be torn, ripped, or have holes, though, which is, I feel like that's a fair ruling because, you still want it to be a professional looking event. You still want to make sure you're protecting yourself against whatever. So I can understand that ruling.
Yeah, and like I said before, jeans can be dressed up or dressed down, and sometimes the style with blue jeans are having holes in them or frays or being baggy, like mom jeans. They're baggy. We all know that. But that's only applied to World Archery. But when you start adding the holes to your jeans, they stop looking professional. And that's why we have that rule is to let the tournament be professional.
What I did find in the rule book, however, interesting in the USA Archery is although you can't be ripped, torn, or have holes, you're allowed to have a raw seam. So if you don't know what a raw seam is, it's just when it doesn't have a hem, it's not folded over, it has little fray bits. You're allowed to have that because it's considered a stylistic aspect, as quoted from the rule book, and it's not considered torn or ripped. However, if you actually take a second to look at the dress policy, it has this in the appendix, which is just if you scroll down a page from the policy. There's a picture with a raw hem that's just slightly more torn up that's not allowed. So if you're going to wear these raw hems for stylistic choices, do be warned, it's not black and white. It's a very gray area. So although it says it's allowed, it's not going to be allowed in every case.
Yeah, and back to the shorts, skirts, and skirts thing, it depends on every judge. It depends on what that judge is feeling that day. It depends on how they view professional, and it's just it's just luck of the draw is how I say it.
In my opinion, if you're going to wear jeans, just stay away from the raw edges. Although they're very cute, it it's not going to help you in any way if you figure out you can't shoot because you have these like raw edges.
Definitely.
So the next thing after jeans is
camouflage.
As the archery community probably knows, is a lot of people bow hunt. Actually, a majority of people who shoot a bow hunt. And honestly, common practice is to wear some kind of camouflage.
No, I'm gonna go out in my brightest colors so the deer can see me coming.
Yeah, that makes sense because you're trying to disguise yourself. But for World Archery, it's not allowed.
At all.
I actually know the ruling on this one just a little bit. So in a lot of countries, camouflage is only for military. You are not allowed to wear camouflage at all if you're not military personnel. For World Archery, just to make it even across the board, you're not allowed to use camouflage. And the World Archery definition of camouflage is as follows. Camouflage is a method of concealment based on interweaving patterns and colors. It enables a visible organism or object to pass unnoticed by blending into its surroundings and or natural environment.
Carson, could you tell me where they give some examples of what this camouflage is?
So what I find interesting, and that's kind of what this whole episode is about, in the rulebook, in the World Archery rulebook, they link a Wikipedia article on military-style camouflage in order to give examples of what camouflage is. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong of them to do this. However, I know in school, we're all told, don't use Wikipedia. It's the worst source. Don't do it.
It was drilled into your brain to not use Wikipedia, and yet here we are. World Archery used Wikipedia as a source.
So if your teacher tells you not to use Wikipedia, just point them to the World Archery rulebook where they use Wikipedia as a source.
As a source, not just like a whatever, like as a source to make a point. They use Wikipedia. Maybe that just shows that we're young or whatever, but it was drilled into my brain that Wikipedia is not a source. I still follow that to this day because I'm so scared of getting points off for using Wikipedia.
Oh, definitely. And just for reference, this is in the interpretations section of the rulebook. It elaborates on certain rulings. So, for example, it said no camouflage, but then it had to elaborate on what camouflage was. So that was an interpretation. That's what some of these are pulled from. But let's move over to USA Archery real quick. So USA Archery says that camouflage clothing is only disallowed for broadcast/live streamed medal matches at national events and after the first cut at US team trial events. If you don't understand what it's saying, it's pretty much saying that you can wear it unless you are being live streamed for a medal match or you have made it past the first stage of trials. That being said, I understand the reasoning on why they allow it at all because they're trying to bring more people in to the archery world. And of course, I want everyone to experience archery the way I do. However, I don't understand why they don't just rule it out because
it's not that hard. I don't think I've ever seen a single person at an archery tournament, like USA Archery tournament, wearing camo something. I don't think I have.
Yeah. I agree with that. Now, I can understand more lenience on equipment because in World Archery, you're not allowed to have any camouflage on your equipment either. So having that lenience for allowing camouflage equipment in USA Archery, that makes sense because if you don't allow it, you're cutting off a lot of people who have a camouflage bow, which I know is a common print.
Yeah, it brings in a lot more people because they'll feel more comfortable shooting that bow because that's what they shoot and they shouldn't be stopped just because it has camouflage. I don't know. I don't understand why they just say no camo clothing at all.
Yeah, because I don't know a single person that only owns camouflage. Can you?
No. Nope. Not one.
Most people at least can get a plain t-shirt and a plain pair of jeans. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not something that's hard to access. So
no, it's not hard at all.
So I don't understand why they don't just say no camouflage or even no camouflage at national events. I don't understand why they put this rule that you kind of have to watch out for when you're wearing camouflage. Kind of like with the raw seams, I'd just say avoid it altogether.
Yeah, it's like I hunt pretty often, I would say. But I don't wear my camo out to go get groceries. I don't wear my camo to go to class. Why would I do that? I have perfectly good clothing that isn't camo that I could wear. So it's just it's an odd rule.
I think the biggest place I see camo on clothing is like hats, but you can go get a $5 hat from Walmart if you need a hat, and you don't have to shoot in a hat. They're changing the rules for something that is, like I said, easily accessible to not wear camo. It's just kind of crazy to me.
It is pretty crazy. But on the last note for the dress code, we're going to talk about matching, uniform matching. I know I dealt with this with Carson when we tried to match our collegiate teams together, because that's always the best part about collegiate outdoor nationals is matching with your team. And it's just something that makes you look professional. And Carson can explain it a lot better than I can, because she did the research. Praise her for it. But Carson, what should we know about matching with our team?
So the biggest thing is, in most competitions at the local and national level, you don't have to worry about matching at all. You don't have to match with your JOAD team. The only time when it comes into effect is when you are on a world stage, such as a World Cup, championship, that kind of stuff. When you're on a world level stage or at collegiate events. And what I find interesting is USA Archery almost treats collegiate athletes as their own mini country. So we go to Texas A&M country, which is kind of a weird way to put it. But if you actually look at the wording, it's very similar to how World Archery rules for countries. So in World Archery and USA Archery, when I say country, I'm just referring to either a country or a college. So in World Archery, every country has to match with other people in their division. So for example, I have to wear, if I'm wearing my maroon jersey for Texas A&M, Chaney also has to wear her maroon jersey for Texas A&M because she is also a compound woman. However, for example, I'm going to pull in Sawyer. Sawyer doesn't have to wear his maroon jersey. If all of the compound men are wearing their gray jerseys, they can wear their gray jerseys. And that's the ruling for World Archery. They have to indicate what school or country you're representing. And that's pretty much the gist for matching in terms of qualifications and elimination events. One interesting thing is in World Archery, you actually have to match bottoms during qualifications. And if you haven't seen it, there's this amazing photo of all of the compound men in Korea. They have the brightest red pants. And it's Sawyer Sullivan, for anyone who doesn't know, Chris Schaff, Nick Cappers, and Jimmy Lutz, who all are wearing these bright red pants to go with their jerseys. And they look very snazzy doing it.
They do look very, very snazzy.
So if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend looking it up. But they were able to do that because they decided to all match within their division. Now, us compound women were not as cool as them, apparently. So we wore what we normally wear, which is navy blue pants. In World Archery, you have to match in division pant-wise. In collegiate, you don't. That's one of the more lenient things. However, in team rounds, that's not the case. So in team rounds for both USA Archery and World Archery, you have to match pants and tops. And they have to designate which country/school you're from. And that's a big thing that a lot of people don't get for collegiate. Although Texas A&M does spice it up a little bit. We had tutus and boas, and I think there were hula skirts last year. There is a reason for that. It is required under the dress code that we are supposed to match. However, we want to add a little bit of flavor to it to make it a little bit more interesting, just so we can bring each other together.
I think my favorite bottoms that I've seen so far are the disco ball skirts. Those were amazing. I think you missed that because you were heading off to Korea.
Yes.
But there was this team on the compound women's side that had disco ball skirts, and they were lighting up under those stadium lights, and it was the coolest thing.
That's awesome. I wish I was there.
No, I wish you were too. Oh, I missed you. But another thing I want to add is if you ever go to a world event or even come watch collegiate events, if you're interested in talking to a coach or a non-archer, they are required to wear some sort of clothing that identifies them as a coach or a manager or whatever for that certain team. So I know like our coaches have jerseys or like polos that they wear, and that designates them. These are the A&M archery coaches, plain and simple. And it just throws in that little extra like matching.
It honestly, my favorite thing about everyone matching is just the fact that it brings everyone together. Like I know that Texas A&M is a fairly big school, but I know that everyone that is wearing a Texas A&M jersey is behind me. And I feel like we bring this up every episode that Texas A&M is a big family. It's a little bit of the cult that everyone says it is, but that's part of the fun. Like, you know, if they're wearing a Texas A&M jersey, they are behind you and they have your back. And that is something that's so cool.
What's even better is right now, an off season technically for school, because school is on summer break right now, they are still texting in the group chat, chit-chatting back and forth about different things going on in the archery world. And I don't know anyone else that stays in touch as much as our team does. We are just such a huge family.
So that's the main thing I wanted to say about like matching and stuff, is that World Archery defines the country uniforms the same way that USA Archery defines collegiate uniforms. And that's just something that I found really interesting, the similarities in wording between that. But if you have any questions and you are at a stage where you're either at a collegiate event or a World Archery event, please just talk to your coach and make sure that they define the rules clearly, just in case you didn't understand what we said, or if we got something wrong, definitely check with your coach just to make sure.
Definitely. You don't want to get slapped with a "you're kicked out, bud" ticket.
So now that we talked all about dress code, let's go ahead and move into some athlete equipment in the World Archery Rulebook, which is what I'm going to pull most of this stuff from, just because USA Archery doesn't define it. It just kind of points towards the World Archery Rulebook. There are multiple sections where it tells you what an arrow is, and if you just want to go ahead and read one of those, that would be great. Go ahead.
I'll read the first one. Arrows of any type may be used provided they comply with the common meaning of the word arrow as used in target archery and do not cause undue damage to the target faces or butts.
Okay, so that seems like a very simple definition.
This is not simple at all. There's so many words. Just say the arrow needs to be an arrow and it can't damage the target.
It says that in just a slightly more professional sense. However, they take it upon themselves in another section of the book. I believe it is in the bare bow section. They separate it based on compound, recurve, and bare bow. They pretty much state the exact same thing, but with more words. So they say, arrows of any type may be used provided they subscribe to the accepted principle and meaning of the word arrow as used in target archery, and that these arrows do not cause undue damage to the targets. So my biggest thing is it sounds like a middle schooler who needs more words for their paper, so they add in these super fancy words. I guess they're not super fancy, but they add in these words that they didn't really need to get the same point across. They already say the same thing in the same rule book. Just a little bit earlier in the chapter, which is chapter 11, if you don't know. In chapter 11, it says what Chaney just read, which was a simpler version. And then a little bit later, it says what I just read, which is more complicated and unnecessarily long. As Chaney said, they can just say, an arrow is this. You must shoot an arrow. Please don't damage the target faces. I know that it should be a little bit more professional than that, but I think it's interesting that they not only did they word it longer than it necessarily had to be, they worded it longly twice, like in 2 different sections.
Yeah, it's wild. And I also like their definition of like an arrow, and that reads, an arrow consists of a shaft with a tip, parentheses, point, nock, fletching, and, if desired, cresting. What's cresting? I've been doing this for 13 years. What is cresting?
I think that is like the wraps, or you can put like, it's the little bangle bongles that can go on your arrow.
Okay, because I was about to say, in my 13 years of experience, I have never heard someone say cresting.
Yeah, now don't quote me on this. I'm not quite sure what cresting is, but I just assume that it's like arrow wraps, or like what is it called? Like end caps that some people put like under their knocks.
Yeah.
I think it's just like the extra little bits that you can add to an arrow.
It's very funny.
But I do like how they provide a definition for an arrow, because they keep it from being ambiguous to just arrows may be of any type. That's a common definition of an arrow, which I'm not even going to jump down that rabbit hole. But but the main thing I just wanted to point out with that was
the 2 different definitions.
They're not even different. They say the same thing, just twice and more complicated.
Still on the topic of arrows, there's another sentence that when I first read it, I was like, huh? And it says, all arrows used in any end shall be identical in appearance and shall carry the same pattern and colors of fletching, nocks, and cresting, if any. So, I don't know who would be shooting 2 different types of arrows. Like, in a tournament, at least. Because I was always taught if they don't match, don't shoot them. But there's obviously a reason for it, right?
Okay, so this is one thing that I don't think a lot of people actually know, this rule. Because technically, what it's saying is your arrows have to match completely. So, if you have white fletching and green nocks, you have to shoot white fletching and green nocks in the same end. This is mainly for camera, I believe, so you can distinguish easier whose arrows are whose. But I just find it interesting that, like I said, not a lot of people know this rule, but you have to shoot pretty much the same arrows within that end. Now, the reason it says you have to shoot the same arrows for the whole tournament is because, let's say you dip below 5 arrows or 6 arrows or 3 arrows, or for whatever competition you're doing, you dip below the number of arrows you're supposed to shoot. Technically, you can, if they have extras, you could use someone else's arrows and shoot those for an end as long as they match. And I think that's one of the things that they make sure to allow in order to allow people to shoot their full tournament instead of having to give up because they don't have enough arrows.
Fair. Understood. And that is a pretty interesting rule. And like you said, a lot of people don't understand that. And I just always go into a tournament having at least 2 backups. It's always good to have backup arrows.
And like I said, I don't think it's necessarily, I don't have any opinions on this rule. Like, I'm not for or against it, but I just think it's something that a lot of people don't know that I have been called out for before. I had one arrow that had a green knock just because I ran out of red knocks at the time I was shooting. I had red knocks. So it had a green knock instead. And somebody called me out on it. And I was like, I didn't know that was a rule. So just so you know, you have to, your arrows have to match.
The more you know.
So this one is very interesting. So the rule is the athlete is allowed to make contact with the grip, bow sling, or finger sling, the string, and string attachments. Once the athlete has come to full draw, contact with the riser brace, cables, cable slider, string stop, stabilizer, or any other attachment to the bow is not allowed.
I need to touch my string stopper at full draw, but I'm not allowed to.
So long story short, what this is saying is when you're at full draw, you can touch your grip, any like finger sling or wrist sling or whatever you have on the bow, and then you can touch your string / release. That's what you can touch at full draw. You can't, however, brace on anything else. And the reason for this ruling, as stated in the World Archery interpretations, is that if it is allowed to like rest your bow against your arm, it allows for more bracing and makes it easier to stay steady, which is the whole point of archery. However,
don't try it at home, please. Please do not try that at home.
I personally do not think that me touching like my cables or cable slider can in any way help me. I feel like it would just hurt me. I don't think it would be of any benefit to me.
You're gonna have a crazy scar afterwards, that's what I can say.
Those are all moving parts. At least the cables and the cable sliders are all moving parts. And the string stopper is that little rubber piece that your string slams into. If you're touching that,
how are you holding the bow?
Well, not even. Like, if you are touching the string slider, your bowstring, which for me at least has 56 pounds of force behind it, is slamming into whatever you're touching with it.
Put your finger there and see what happens. It ain't gonna be pretty, I can tell you that.
So I understand the reason for the ruling. It's to make sure that everyone's shooting in a similar manner in order to make the competition fair. However, I don't think most people, I'm not going to say everyone, because obviously there was a reason this interpretation was given.
Rules are made because of other people's mistakes. So obviously there was something going on when this rule came about.
Exactly. So I'm not going to say, like I said, I'm not going to say everyone, but most people are not going to use anything other than the grip and release because it just doesn't make sense. At least in my brain, it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense at all. Like, all you need to grab is the string or string attachment, your grip and grip attachment. That's it. Like, that's all you need to touch while you're at full draw. If you're touching anything else, I don't think your form's right. Genuinely.
All right, so now that we talked about athlete equipment, let's talk about one thing that a lot of people know you're not allowed to use, which is electronics.
Don't use your phone. Don't touch it. It's not allowed. Actually, Carson's going to tell you the rule on it, actually.
Electronics aren't allowed. Most people know you aren't allowed to use a light on your sight. You aren't allowed to be talking on the phone on the way down to pull your arrows. However, a lot of people don't actually realize there are instances where you are allowed to use your phone within the rule set. Again, this is World Archery. USA Archery rules might be a little bit different, as we saw earlier. But in World Archery, mobile devices such as mobile phones are permitted in front of the waiting line for running software that simply allows the athlete to plot arrow impacts on the target as one would on printed paper used for the same purpose. Basically, what that's saying is you can use it for arrow plotting. I also know that if you're taking a photo, you're allowed to use it for photos, as long as you're not sending it to anybody. And also, you're allowed to use electronic devices for monitoring physiological data, such as fitness trackers, smartwatches, heart rate chest bands, those kinds of things. Although the overarching idea is no electronics are allowed, there's a lot of exceptions on it, and I highly recommend if you're curious about it, just look into the rule book, because if there is a lot of exceptions where it is allowed. And I personally didn't know all of the exceptions before I read, and I still probably don't know all of the exceptions, but
yeah. And another thing, like another quick note, this is for USA, like this is for World Archery, USA Archery, but we have NFAA. That organization does allow electronics. You can have a light arrow monitor, a bubble, like a light up bubble. You can have light up knocks for NFAA. There's no rules on electronics there. So it's really interesting, especially for me who shoots both pretty regularly, that I can use my light on one tournament and then the very next day I can't use it at all. So just something to keep in mind. Make sure to know your rules. Make sure to know what's allowed and what's not allowed.
For any tournament you're going to, I highly recommend, if you don't want to read through the rule book, ask a coach, ask a judge, ask someone you know. what if something is allowed if you aren't sure. And if you go to a tournament and somebody tells you that something's not allowed, bring it up with the judge. Let them know. Ask them their opinion, ask them their ruling. Because I know at a lot of local tournaments, they do let some of these things slide just because they know that it's a lot of people's first tournaments. They don't know the rules. Now, don't try and push it. Don't go to a national tournament and try and bring out, try and bring out like a light on your site. If you're at that level, you should probably know that you're not allowed to use lights on your site. However, like at a local tournament, they might let you keep it on as long as you make sure you're keeping it off. It really depends, and it's a tournament to tournament basis.
So that was all the interesting, crazy rules that Carson could find. I want her to tell you about this wild finding that she came across while researching. She texted me the moment she found it. She texted me this information, and I was speechless. I don't know what to do with this information, if I'm frankly honest, because it's mind-boggling.
All right. So in the World Archery Rulebook, it's very close to the end. I think it's like in chapters in the 30s. In Article 33 and 34, there is something that I have never heard of before. There's actually two things. So it's run archery and ski archery, which I've never heard of these before. This is my first time coming across them. So according to the World Archery Rulebook, I did not deep dive into these because I figured I would need a lot more time to talk about it and even process it. So according to World Archery, ski archery combines cross-country skiing and archery. How they do that, I have no idea.
No clue.
And run archery combines cross-country running and archery. So like I said, I have not done any research into this. Mainly, I just opened the page, I saw it, and I was like, I'm going to save this for a little bit later. Mainly just because, one, I knew we wouldn't have time in this episode, and two, I needed a second to process. I am not sure how these are run at all.
I've been skiing before, and I'm not saying I'm good at skiing, but if you can ski and shoot a bow at the same time, who are you?
Well, I don't even know if it's like you're skiing and shooting at the same time. Maybe it's like, triathlons. Like I don't know.
I don't understand. Another thing she sent to me, and it was like the only thing that she told me that she looked at it, was the different ways that the athletes can carry their bows.
Okay, so in run archery, apparently, the athlete can choose between 3 ways to carry the bow: by hand, in a back bow quiver, or with a harness. Now, I don't know what that means.
I don't know what you mean by harness, because I feel like a back bow quiver is a harness, but I guess I'm wrong.
I guess the harness would be like the front. And this is not to make fun of anyone who do these sports.
No.
Like I am impressed, and I would definitely love to learn more about this, but I don't know how it works. And it
just wow. I never thought I could learn more about archery than this. I thought, because everyone's seen the people riding on the horses shooting and shooting with their feet, and people have seen that. But ski and run archery, wow. Just wow.
It's crazy to me that they are World Archery.
It's in the rule books.
It's in the World Archery Rulebooks. Going into this episode, I never thought I would find something like this in the World Archery Rulebook.
Obviously, it's big enough or important enough to be in the World Archery Rulebook.
So you got a little tidbit of what we're thinking. If you want to see us do like a deep dive into this and figure out what it is, and even other forms of archery, such as the horseback riding archery or things like that. If you want to see that, please let us know. I definitely want to look into this more because I am so interested in how this is conducted and like who was the winner of the last tournament, the ski archery tournament.
Yeah, I want to know who ran the fastest miles and then shot the best arrows. I want to know.
Like I want to know. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, please let us know and we will do a full episode covering interesting archery ways.
Definitely. Oh, geez. This episode has been a roller coaster of information and reading, and it's just been a long episode. But with that said, this isn't everything. This is honestly barely scratching the surface. So if you're interested in a part 2 for us diving even deeper into the rule book and even into other fields of archery, let us know. We'll definitely look into it, find some more interesting rules and see what we can come up with.
Like you've probably noticed, we've been on a hiatus for a little bit. So we've been super busy. So this isn't even me combing through the rule books. This is what I found almost on the surface. Just skimming through some of the rules that I knew were a little bit weird. So if you guys want to see that, I will do a full deep dive. I will look through the rule book. I'll read through it and see what I find is interesting and let you guys know. Go visit our social media. We are on Instagram, archery.academia. I forget every time.
_
Archery_academia. Definitely follow us there. And go listen to all the previous episodes if you haven't already. And the next episode will air right where you're listening to this now. So please come join us for the next episode.
Yes. And again, sorry about the hiatus. We've been super busy and we are so happy to be back and recording. But the next episode comes out right after the Olympics, give or take.
Yes.
And it talks completely about recurve, and it's going to be a very fun episode because you get 2 compounders that one of us is scared of recurves and the other one just has no interest in them, talking about recurve archery. But Carson, is there something I'm missing?
Oh, so there might be a little guest.
Oh, no. Who could it be?
I don't know. Please take your guesses over on our Instagram. We're going to go ahead and put up a poll right as this episode airs to take some guesses as to who the guest might be. If you're the guest, don't say anything. I know you will, and I know you.
I'm watching you. Always watching. Well, thank y'all so much for listening, and I really hope y'all enjoyed this episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.